It always goes like this. She leaves first, icy and self-assured, disengaged. She claims to be finished and that she needs distance and persuades herself that she's outgrown you. You remain motionless, bewildered, attempting to comprehend how something that seemed indestructible at first might fall apart in a day. She walks away. You remain. Additionally, for weeks, you fight that silent conflict for perhaps months between your heart and reason. However, this is something you didn't anticipate. She returns one day, not using the she left the same flames behind, but with her eyes were hesitant. All of a sudden, she's liking previous posts, answering stories, just checking in to see how you've been. You sense it right away. That change in her voice, the gravity of her words. However, she is surprised to learn that you've evolved, because this is the reality that most men are unaware of. The instant if she leaves, it's not your end. She's learned her lesson. Women leave when they think they have witnessed every aspect of you, when they believe there is nothing else to do, find nothing more to dispute. However, when you disappear into quiet, when you rebuild rather than pleading, when you rise rather than reach, in her opinion, fractures. Abruptly, her thoughts begin to replay. She believed she had moved on from everything, from your speech pattern, the serenity in your tone, the seriousness of your quiet. Now, she recalls it differently because distance has an effect on a woman's ego. It reveals what her ego attempts to conceal. As she left, she anticipated hurt to force you to pursue. She sought evidence that her absence was too much for you to bear. However, when you remained calm, quiet, concentrated, it turned the whole story. Her interest was piqued by your forbearance. Your lack of interest turned into her passion. At that point, the electricity comes back to you, not because of your gaming habits, but since you became an expert at control. She didn't return because you pursued her. Her. She returned since she was unable to take your place. That serene, grounded vitality she used to take things for granted, but now feels uncommon. The same quiet that used to. She is now consumed by confusion. Thus, yes, she turned to go. However, the instant she began to consider you once more, you won. She's trying to test the waters now, to determine whether the man she left is still the same, a man in front of her. However, this time, you are unique. You aren't responding. You're not in a hurry. You're not observing for the purpose of closure. The closure is you, because she never anticipated this, that without her, your presence, that her quiet would increase your strength. Additionally, when she eventually returned, she would be up against a man who didn't no longer had to be selected in order to understand his value. It's not about retaliation, it's regarding revelation. She left to test your worth, and she's on her way. Return to see how you've changed. Let's jump in. Section 1. The reasons he walked away. The hidden psychology underlying distance. Rarely does a lady walk away abruptly. The gradual deterioration of regard, tension, and intrigue. The majority of men are unaware of it because they conflate connection with comfort. However, attraction doesn't go away quickly. It disappears silently as soon as she detects you are no longer a challenge. This is the unsettling reality. She didn't go because she lost interest. She stopped feeling, so she left. Women are sensitive beings. They live on polarity, energy, and rhythm of emotion. The instant the connection becomes dependable, she feels secure but lacks inspiration. Additionally, safety lack of mystery causes emotional boredom. She began to retreat, not since you were unable to love her, although when you ceased to be undecodable, you provided too much assurance, availability, you're too much. The mystery that captivated her turned into solace, that dulled her enthusiasm. From her perspective, The man who used to make her pulse quick began to feel like the norm. However, this is where deeper psychology is found. When she made the decision to leave, it wasn't about taking your place. It concerned trying you out. She was curious to see what your absence would make itself known. Would you break down? Would you plead? Would you go after her and verify that she remained your center? Because she would get her if you did. Confirmation and depart permanently. This is most males don't pass the concealed test. When she walks away, not just taking measurements, she's assessing your might, your suffering. Without her, your world would come to an end. Understands that she was your goal. However, if you remain silent, your world will continue. Stays constant. Your energy is concentrated. When your presence is grounded, she starts to have doubts. Distance, you see, is the strength's emotional reflection. The man who quietly passes out demonstrates he never took the lead. The individual who rebuilds while it turns into not to be forgotten. In order to keep the plot going, she left. But to create, to feel something again tension, to elicit a response, to observe if she was still emotionally serious about you, it's a game of ego masquerading as clarity. However, she was surprised to learn that her farewell would become her greatest instructor. Women only comprehend the value of a guy when his silence ends responding to their feelings. Upon discovering that the man who formerly chased her and didn't need her emotions anymore, worthwhile. Attraction is when silently and uncontrollably rekindles. Therefore, she wasn't searching for separation. She sought evidence, evidence of who you would have become in her absence. And when she eventually turns around and notices that you remained intact, that's when curiosity gives way to desire. Section 2. How your quiet became into her obsession. As she left, she anticipated silence as a sign of failure. She pondered you would wait, look at her page, and send a communication, send a question disguised as worry. She thought your panic would replace the serenity, that you would break under her weight. Absence. However, something else took place. You fell silent and remained silent. You didn't try to capture her energy. You took back yours. At that point, the script started to turn over. Initially, she informed herself that didn't give a damn. She performed with assurance, shared, grinned, and persuaded her friends she was all right. However, ego has an expiration date. When her pride subsided, reassuring her, curiosity began murmuring, "Why hasn't he made contact?" At that point, stillness ceases to be tranquilly and turns into pressure. Due to silence is only pleasant when you maintain authority. After losing control, silence turns into suffering. Each hour, she doesn't get your message. Her thoughts are filled with the gaps. Unsure of your actions, who are you with? And why are you paying attention? No longer goes around her world. She begins recalling details she had forgotten. Your patience, your focus, and your calm tone. However, those same qualities suddenly seem alluring. Thus, she isn't contrasting you with you were. She's contrasting you with all the man who pursued you, talking men too much, respond too quickly, and require too much. And your quiet feels like power. The contradiction is that the exact item she formerly loathed you for turning into the thing she longs. Your disengagement turns into preferable. Your self-control becomes risky. She starts to understand that you were never emotionally incompetent. You were discriminating in terms of emotions. Additionally, that she's crazy about differentiation. This is the reality. Being silent simply produces obsession when it's worthwhile. If you lapse into weakness, forgetting you. However, if you vanish into growth, she begins to recall you in a new way, as the one she left, not as the man she left. She was underestimating. Your quiet is no longer meaningless. It's full of proof. Your development, your tranquility, your guidance. She senses it. See it in your presence. Hear it in your tone. Feel it without you. You're not no more requesting to be seen. You're silently turning into something that people remember. This is where the twist lies. The instant she understands she no longer has authority over your feelings, she begins to lose command of obsession starts when it's hers. Not only with your focus, but with your apathy. Because a woman is more uneasy about nothing than compared to a man who can survive without her, continue to flourish. Your lack of response has turned into a she is unable to leave the mirror each time she examines it and notices a reflection of her error. She didn't turn down a man, but she miscalculated a man, and that insight, it furs instead of fading. Section 3. When her pride becomes a chase. She initially persuaded herself she was finished. Speaking aloud to her pals, she said, perhaps even thought it was true. She made statements like, I've moved or he'll come back. On. However, underneath that assurance was something far less stable. I doubt it. And uncertainty is the initial fissure in the armor of pride. As soon as a woman leaves, one thing is necessary for her ego to survive: your response. It requires evidence that you're in pain, that you still give a damn, that you continue to circle her universe. However, when there is never a response, her pride starts to wither. It is subtle at first. She looks at your page. She keeps looking at old photos. She scrolls to check for changes in your bio, or made a fresh post. When you're digital, she doesn't see anything. Your emotional state is reflected in silence. She begins to panic. She doesn't yet miss you, yet since she doesn't comprehend you no longer. That marks the start of the emotional reversed. The woman who formerly possessed the upper hand is currently questionable. Her ego murmurs, he'll cave. As intuition responds, what if he doesn't? The tension that exists between the ego and her internal conflict is fueled by emotion. A conflict just standing has already earned you the victory. Still, each day that goes by without two emotions are nourished by your message, showing respect and interest. Esteem, since she perceives power in your self-control. Interest, since she doesn't understand your thoughts. The chase starts at that point, not psychological as opposed to physical. She begins posting in a different way. The captions become shorter, colder, and more mysterious. She isn't attempting to prove that she has moved on. She's attempting to observe if you'll respond. She wants evidence that you still give a damn, not for resolution, but for ease. However, you've moved on from that. Your lack of response has developed into poise. You no longer look for attention. You draw it in. You've given up pursuing assurance and began giving orders vitality. Additionally, upon realizing that, her pride turns into a desire. Her romanticization of your absence starts. She erases the negative memories and enhances the positive ones. How you listened, the way you maintained your composure, the how you didn't ask for help. That sentimental contrast turns into a catalyst. She is unable to quiet. Love isn't here yet. It's curiosity giving way to desire because the human mind is incapable of processing incomplete tales. Additionally, your silence left her with a tale without a conclusion. She is now desires closure, but she secretly doesn't wish to put an end to it. She desires to open it again, to find out if the man she left lives awaiting. However, when she learns that he's not waiting, at this point her dignity completely falls apart. Additionally, the woman who used to walk walks back, not to prevail you, but to experience you once more. Section 4. The proper method for react without losing power. She returns in silence, never with a magnificent admission, but never with complete sincerity. Small actions, such as a like on your narrative, a message regarding anything unimportant, a stranger. It is concealed as amiability, yet it's actually reconnaissance. She's putting the temperature. She's not requesting you. She is requesting a copy of herself. That was important to you. Additionally, this is where the game restarts. When the majority of guys lose whatever they constructed, they see her name appear, their hearts pound, and all of a sudden, all the self control, all the quiet, all the power fades. They react emotionally while attempting to choose where things stopped. However, this is the truth. If you grant her access to the same, you teach her that you're the one who mistreated her. Silence wasn't evolution, it was an act. The stoic man does not respond. He answers, and when he does, he doesn't say much. His energy is serene and his tone is measured. He makes no effort to sound disengaged. He just is. Due to you can't pretend to be indifferent. It can only must be earned. When she makes contact with you, your punishing her is not the job. It's to uphold the new benchmark. Brief responses, but in a friendly manner. Courteous, but not individual. Straightforward, yet never defensive. Allow her to sense the distinction between privilege and access. At one point, she had the whole you. She now receives the synopsis. This is what occurs in terms of the mind. When she discovers that you're not, it elicits emotional availability, scarcity. She senses her power is gone. Not because you're tranquil, which makes you cruel. That composure conveys what words never was able to. You cannot arrive and depart as you no longer do as you please. Additionally, the instant she detects that, the polarity changes once more. She sends lengthier messages. Her voice becomes softer. Her self-esteem immediately drops, enough to push your limits. She begins thinking back on earlier attempting to revive emotional memories doors that you've already shut. However, don't give in to nostalgia. She misses the past. Are you not? It is a representation of herself. Once your attendance has been confirmed, you don't need to invite her to acknowledge you. Her back in. The art is that. Answer similar to a man who has moved on, not quite out of spiteful, but unstable. Being less reactive makes you more. Your emotions are pursued because women avoid wanting closure. They are power hungry, and when you maintain your composure, she understands she's lost both. Here's where your silence leaves a legacy. You've received training, her subconscious to link your calm force and vitality. She will never acknowledge that the version of you that she left behind is no longer there. She no longer talks when she messages. The man pleaded with her to stay. She's the man she can't stop talking to, contemplating. And that's all, my brother. How you react while maintaining your authority. Section 5. Allowing her to observe herself by means of your quiet. Once you become proficient in silence, something odd things happen. People begin to hear themselves more loudly. The mirror is that. Impact. Your composure doesn't agitate, it reflects. It reveals people's true selves when you quit supporting their story. And for a female who formerly dominated your emotional rhythm, that reflection can have disastrous consequences. Your quiet annoyed her at first. Then she became perplexed. It now reveals her. Each time she attempts to ignite a response and receives just silence, she must confront the fact that she's been staying away. She doesn't possess the no longer has the same authority. As she gazes at, she can now see how far away she produced. She spots the guy who used to required her approval now, completely independent. She observes how thoroughly you've restored your vitality. And she understands that her access was sacrificed for peace. That insight goes beyond rejection was never possible because women, the guys they lose don't haunt them. The guys they can't have torment them, no longer have an impact. And your silence is just that, achieves. It forces her to face the reality that she no longer exerts emotional control over you. She is able to text, hint, and remember, but your composure never wavers. You're not silent because you're in pain. It originates in peace. This is what turns your lack of presence into strength. You're not battling her ego anymore. Her ego is battling itself because of you. The more she attempts to evoke feelings, the more your poise serves as a reminder of what she was defeated. You don't give lectures, explain, and you just don't seem to care. And that stability becomes the mirror in which she perceives as her own self she made an effort to hide. The arrogant, impetuous, or manipulative aspect that is now revealed by your silence. Your alienation hits harder because of this, more than any message could convey. You have taken out her capacity to determine your worth. She used to see her likeness in your respect. She now recognizes her errors in your absence. The secret is right here. You don't need to say, "You hurt me." Evolution tells you so. You never must admit, "I'm over you." Silence is proof. You don't have to request closure. Your lack of interest is the conclusion since quiet doesn't dispute. It makes itself clear. It demonstrates who had control and who remained calm. Additionally, when she understands that she lost more than a man, but she begins to feel something for her mirror, a pain she is unable to identify. That isn't heartache. Accountability is that. Retaliation is not the purpose of the mirror effect. It has to do with revelation. When you give up trying to comprehend, you turn into the instruction she imparts to herself each time she thinks of you. Section number 6. When she begins to pursue the she tested calm once, it starts the same way every time. Silently, she begins contacting people more frequently, not in a vulnerable manner, but indirectly. A late night message and a response here. There are inquiries that are unnecessary. Responses. Love isn't here yet. Loss under the pretext of inquiry. She isn't after you. She is pursuing the "you are relaxed" due to the fact that following all the commotion, the disputes, the drama, and the acting as though it's peaceful now house. She also recognizes that she left from it. She initially refuses to acknowledge it. She will try to provoke in order to test the waters, emotion to determine your level of concern. However, you no longer play that game. You don't flinch. There is no over-explanation. You avoid causing her the mental turmoil she after being fed. You provide her with what she does not anticipate, calm. That's the reversed. She thought the same silence meant that weakness now seems mysterious. She mistook the same patience as now. Passivity appears to be power. Additionally, the same man she used to take for granted feels inaccessible. That distance is scorching her ego and arouses her feelings. You see, the human mind longs for what it cannot forecast. She can't read you anymore. She is unaware of your feelings, what you want, or if she is still important. That attraction is fueled by ambiguity, not manipulation, but a difference in mood. Don't reach out, will be whispered by her pride. Once more, her feelings will mutter louder. What if, however, he has moved on? That your quiet is a weapon in your inner battle, in real time. Because as soon as she begins needing your serenity, she begins to lose command. It is too strong for her to match. She cannot replicate it. She is unable to locate it in anybody else. Each new relationship feels less anchored, shallower, and noisier. Since a woman has sensed your tranquility, everything else seems fleeting. At this point, she starts chasing, not out of emotion rather than ego. She does more than simply miss you. She longs for the self-image that she had when she was close to your equilibrium, the sense of understanding she had without words, the manner in which you never just observed, not judged. She is attempting to regain that, the sense of security in your poise. This is where the irony lies. The more she pursues that serenity, the more she understands she is no longer able to possess it. It isn't hers. To manage, you have to keep it safe, as she is the one replaying now. Situations, questioning decisions, pondering whether she will ever encounter that peace once more. She also won't, not unless she deserves it. The man who previously needed her approval has transformed into the man she needs to feel in balance. The complete reverse is that, when she no longer flees from your serene and begins to pursue it. Section 7. When you've let her go and she wants you back, outgrown the necessity. At some point, following the quiet, the strain, the distance, at which point she breaks. The tone softens and messages get longer. All of a sudden, she is recalling the minor items, your ability to make her laugh, the serene in your gaze, the steadiness with which she couldn't locate it elsewhere. She isn't no longer attempting to attract attention. She's attempting to find serenity. She will say she is missing you. She will claim to have been contemplating. She may even claim that she's altered. However, her true statement is this: I didn't think you would be all right without me. At that point, you finally comprehend. You didn't wait for her at all. You were eagerly for this epiphany. The instant you recognized that your silence didn't only alter her perception of you, it altered your self-perception. She departed because she believed you would require her to remain whole. However, your quietness increased something more powerful: respect for oneself. Where you used to stand, she now stands. Not sure, hopeful, yearning for a resolution that you don't no longer needed. This is the reality that most men don't reach. Getting her was never the aim. Back. Regaining yourself was the aim. Silence, remoteness, and no interaction. They weren't penalties, they were cleansing. You overcame rejection and arrived out clearly. You no longer had to be selected since you ultimately made a decision. Therefore, don't interpret her homecoming as triumph. Consider it confirmation. Evidence of your transformation into her absence carries weight. That your tranquility was strong enough to reverberate. That she experienced even when viewed from a distance. You don't have to turn her down. You don't need to show off your development. Simply remain still. Allow her to sense the seriousness of who you've changed. Because she will realize at that very instant what her pride previously couldn't. That leaving didn't make you less valuable, it showed it. She'll observe you and determine where there was pandemonium, there was calm. She will experience distance from the previous residents of reliance, and she will secretly understand that you don't need her to finish your story anymore. She's only a part of it. That's when real power emerges. Calm, steady, simple. Nor by reclaiming her, nor in turning her down, but in understanding that you don't need to make a decision immediately, because your tranquility is independent of her. No longer. She left, believing your narrative came to an end. However, she returned, recognizing that she only initiated your evolution. You no longer pursue, you just exist. Don't prove it. That's the end of her authority and the start of your heritage. To put it briefly, there's the time in a man's life when he understands that peace is more important. Rather than being comprehended, that quiet can outweigh any justification, and that occasionally the most potent thing you can say is absolutely nothing. She strolled away believing your story was over. However, she actually gave you some space to discover your strength. You weren't destroyed by your quiet. It refined you. It eliminated vulnerability, dependence, cacophony, and the core of a man's magnetic qualities: direction, discipline, and restriction. Because as she was looking for confirmation in unfamiliar settings, You were constructing an object that she cannot touch no longer. Existence. Furthermore, presence isn't noisy. It's not begging. There's no need for an announcement. It's just is. That type of energy is what turns absence and obsession with indifference into allure, quiet into heritage. She can see it now. The man who waited once now moves with intention. The man who formerly extended out and is now motionless. The individual, whoever formerly required closure, is now the conclusion. What breaks her is that pride above all else. Not you, not your aloofness, but your retaliation serene. For peace is power. Calm is clarity. Calm is the master of confidence. Through suffering. See, she didn't show up. Return since. You persuaded her to do so. She returned since your quiet reminded me she will never find it again. The silence of a man who has outgrown his need for to be selected. This is the conundrum of manly vitality. When you cease demonstrating your worth, the world begins to acknowledge it. When you give up seeking approval, people begin to seek you out. And when you no longer require her, she begins keeping you in mind. However, this time, you don't have the same function. You don't look for her focus. You keep your peace. You don't give an explanation. You embody it. Because the man who recognizes his value but doesn't express be heard. He speaks to leave a lasting impression. Thus, allow her to return if she has. However, let her meet the incarnation of yourself. From her absence, the man she had never met existed, the man who no longer pursues, the someone whose vitality inspires reverence, the A man whose quiet speaks much. And if you received this message today, keep this in mind. She might have left from your history, but you walked into the future. If this struck a chord with you, should sign up for this channel, since here we master rather than chase feelings. Them. I'll see you in the upcoming video.